Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Education Committee. Just before we begin, just wanted to say a few words about the sad news that we received a few weeks ago about Frank Angel, and it's really just to let you know that, well, thanks to Councillor Buchanan for letting council officers and members know, and it gave us the opportunity, myself, Dr. Ratter, yourself, Councillor Buchanan and Councillor Craigno, and I think Dorothy, yourself and your husband, we all attended, and Councillor Edwin as well, actually. We all attended the service for Frank, and one of the things that really shone through from what the rabbis said about him and his daughter was about Frank's love of education. And it was clearly something he cared passionately about, and we were very grateful to actually, have him here with us for many years. I'm not sure exactly how many, quite a few. And even the rabbi spoke about, even in recent weeks, Frank had been talking to him about his own learning, and he was still examining religious texts, and and probably Frank's fashion, it was he picked the most difficult ones that are sometimes hard to interpret. But he's even in his own daughter as well talked about all the family trips to museums and everything. But that was Frank, his love of lifelong learning. So we're very grateful that we had him. And I'm not sure if other members might want to make a comment. Councillor Buchanan.
Happy to come in, Chair. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think, it was very sad news when we learned of Frank's passing. He's obviously been a member of our Education Committee for some considerable time. And as you touched on, his love of learning, not just for himself, but for everyone, and for everyone to have the opportunity to learn was what really drove him on in many respects in terms of his work, not only here in East Renfrewshire in the community and on the Education Committee, but in life in general. And we've all seen, the efforts that he made to ensure that everybody had that opportunity. And so he will be a significant loss to his community and to the Education Committee. But yeah, a very sad day indeed. But we know that there will be a legacy in terms of the work that he has put forward, that he has continued with up until the very end, ensuring that there was a lot in place to ensure that, that his legacy, that the love of learning that he had will be instilled in many others going forward. And a very sad day, as we say, but he's an individual who I know anyone that met him would one of the most amiable, likeable people that you could ever wish to meet. And I'm sure that will have inspired many that came across him, that met him, because his learning ability was huge and second to none. So yeah, a very sad day indeed, but thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick.
I think, like many people in East Renfrewshire, we were kind of devastated when we heard of Frank's passing. Frank was one of the kindest, most considerate people I've ever had the privilege to meet. Very inclusive guy, but a lover of books. Very interesting and always interested. Always great company to be with. I used to look forward often to go to coffee mornings with Frank. And he brought such a mix of people all the time. It was fascinating. So he was terrific in the Education Committee, always interested, and the way he approached things, the way he got his point across without falling out with people, even though it could be diametrically opposite. It was a skill and a half. We get a lot to learn from Frank. He will be missed by this Education Committee. He'll be missed across East Renfrewshire, and it's nice to have the memory of Frank. Thank you very much. And can I just say welcome to Evelyn, which I'm sure we'll hear later.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Would you like to say something, everyone?
I just want to say, which one? Oh, okay. I just want to say that I will pass on the comments this morning to his family, and acknowledge the great comfort that the family got from the response from East Renfrewshire Council. The kindness they were shown has really been a great comfort, but I'll pass on all your comments to the family and to the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. Dorothy?
Just very briefly to echo what everybody else has already said this morning, and to say as a REC colleague, what a pleasure it was to work with Frank, how open, how honest he was, how friendly, how understanding, and how very ecumenical in his thoughts he was also, which made it very easy to deal with him. And his wise contributions to our Education Committee, I think, are going to be missed. But as you've already said, Colm, he has a lasting legacy which we'll all reap the benefits of. So I remember him with great fondness.
Thank you, Dorothy. Absolutely. Frank, him shone through again, you know, at the service. So many folk, he was just a lovely man. And he was very dedicated to everything he did. So, yeah, and to echo what Colm has said, Councillor Merrick, Evelyn, welcome. And would you mind actually letting us know about yourself, just in case, you know, members aren't aware of you?
Sorry. Although I do have a very loud voice because I'm a brown owl. My name is Evelyn Yed, and I'm the paid administrator for the Glasgow Jewish Representative Council, which is the umbrella organisation for all the Jewish educational, welfare and social charities in East Renfrewshire and Glasgow. I'm very honoured to serve on this committee. I've got a lot of experience with East Renfrewshire Council education. I'm a past employee for 15 years till I left to come to this job. I've worked with about 10 different head teachers within East Renfrewshire Council, and just to name drop, Dr. Duffy, Patricia Kennedy, an impressive list, and I learnt a lot. And I'm also a very grateful parent, having had 5 children through East Renfrewshire schools, Eastwood High School, Mearns Castle High School, Calderwood Lodge. So I'm a very grateful parent at the good start that my family got, and I'm very honoured to be here. Thank you.
That's great, thanks very much. You're very welcome. And well, I think it'd be appropriate now for us to, especially in Frank's memory, to continue on with the meeting and continue to, you know, hold the bar as high as he helped us to set it. So, lovely, thank you. So, the usual agenda, first couple of items, and we have any apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillors Devlin and Wallace.
Okay, thank you. And any declarations of interest? No, great, thank you. And so, yeah, the first item then is, I believe, is from Janice. It's going to be an SQA verbal update. We had obviously a lot of children anticipating March.
Thank you, Convener. I'm delighted to share that once again pupils across East Renfrewshire have excelled across all key measures with another year of outstanding exam results. The attainment of the young people of East Renfrewshire attracts much publicity, and their performance in 2023 SQA examination results was no different, especially as this year we saw record levels of performance in S4. The global COVID-19 pandemic led to the cancellation of exams in Scotland in 2020 and 2021 and alternative approaches to certification. Since 2022, nationally we returned to formal external assessment, which again was exams and coursework. However, SQA made it clear that measures continued to be needed in 2023 to support the recovery of learning and teaching while maintaining the standards. SQA have worked with partners across the education community, including teachers, lecturers, learners, parents and carers throughout the year to agree the approach to assessment. A wide-ranging package of support was also developed. This support was aimed to enable learners to demonstrate what they know, understand and can do within the context of the ongoing recovery. Nationally, it has been recognised that the achievement of this year's learners are again a testament to their dedication and resilience, and demonstrate a further step forward along the path of recovery and normal rewarding. In East Renfrewshire, as well as a record-breaking performance in S4, we have continued to raise attainment with very strong higher and advanced higher results. These achievements are tribute to the hard work and commitment of pupils and the collective efforts and support of their parents and school staff. We will be providing a more detailed look at the results with our annual presentation focus on attainment, but I wish to report a few particular highlights at this stage. At National 5 and S4, the authority achieved its best ever performance, with 82% of the cohort achieving 5 or more awards, up from 78% in 2022. 95% of S4 pupils achieve 5 or more qualifications at National 4 or better, which is similar to the previous year. Wood Farm and Williamwood High Schools achieved outstanding best ever S4 results. Mearns Castle, St Luke's and St Ninians High Schools all saw the proportion of S4 pupils who achieved 5 or more awards at National 5 increase from the previous year. Barrhead, St Luke's and Wood Farm High had their best ever performance for the proportion of pupils achieving 5 or more awards at National 4. Overall, nationally outcomes have returned to almost pre-pandemic levels, which is 2019. Yet in East Renfrewshire, the quality and passes have continued to rise. Incredibly, of the 10,471 young people in S4 presented at a National 5 award, 61% achieved an A grade, an increase from pre-pandemic rates in 2019 of 54%. This compares very favourably with the national figure of 38.6%. Notably, in 2023, there was an increase in the proportion of S4 boys achieving 5 or more National 5s. This is the best we've had in the past 5 years. At high level, performance of S5 pupils were once again strong across all measures. 80% of the original roll achieved 1 or more hires, 69% attained 3 or more hires, and 47% attained 5 or more. This is the authority's best ever performance, excluding the alternative certification model and the generous approach applied to the 2022 exam diet. Mearns Castle had their best results for 5 or more hires, with an 8% increase at 59%, and Eastwood High School continued to have impressive attainment across key S5 measures, recording their best ever for some measures out with the ACM model. 48% of the 500 in 2012 pupils presented at higher level achieved an A grade, an increase from 46% in 2019. And again, this compares favourably with the national figure of 32.8%. Impressively, 15.7%, which is 818 pupils, achieved 5 A grades at higher level. At Advanced Higher in S6, the performance across the authority was the second highest ever, recorded at 46%, with the highest being recorded in 2021 when the alternative certification model replaced traditional exams. Barrhead, Williamwood and Wood Farm had their best ever results for the proportion of S6 pupils achieving 1 or more advanced hires, increasing by over 11%, 3% and 3% respectively. These are just some of this year's highlights. However, it demonstrates the culture and ambition and the commitment to continuous improvement across the education department and our schools to aim higher and to continue to deliver for all our pupils. At a future education committee, we will provide a fuller presentation looking in detail at the excellence and in particular the equity agenda and how we raise the bar for key groups, including our most disadvantaged learners. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to all the pupils, parents and staff for their vital contributions throughout another challenging year for all in education, and all should be congratulated on their achievements for all their young people. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Janice. Absolutely want to echo that. The parents, the pupils, the teachers, everyone. There's lots of very impressive statistics there, and obviously looking forward to the further more in-depth report with the other aspects that you mentioned. But does anyone have any other queries or questions? Councillor Bagnall.
It was just to recognise the hard work for our pupils. Over the last couple of years. I know it's been very difficult for them, and we've seen challenges with attainment and getting pupils back to school after the pandemic. And also a thanks to our staff who work tirelessly to make sure our pupils achieve their full potential, and also to the parents and carers who support our young people. And I think it's especially good this year that we recognise the pupils at Isabel Mayer for the results they achieved in National 2s and 3s. I think that's really important that we recognise everyone in education and their achievements too. So I was pleased to see that, and not just the traditional national 4s, 5s and hires and advanced hires. So thank you everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Pragnell. Any other comments? Councillor Buchanan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, just to echo the remarks made, to congratulate our young people on the fantastic success that they have shown they are capable of during this exam period. And of course, they don't do that all on their own. There's outstanding work by our education department, by everyone from the teachers to our support networks to our care services, that all play a huge part in ensuring that our children have the opportunity to shine when it comes to delivering the results. So the opportunity is obviously there for them. They have done fantastic yet again, and we look forward to seeing all of the detail as it starts to become more apparent. But I think congratulations to everyone involved again for another successful year. And that goes right across the board for all of our young people and all of our learners. And as we see the rest of the agenda today, that's a key part of our education in East Renfrewshire. So yeah, congratulations to all.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Oh, sir, Fiona.
Just very briefly, and listening to that report, it's all the positive remarks that came out, like increase, best ever, improvement. I mean, those words just sort of jumped out at me. So I'd like to congratulate, as again, the parents and pupils and staff for all the good work that they've done.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, it is incredibly pleasing to hear that's the key words. It's, yeah, and obviously the hard work and everything that's gone into it, especially over the past few years, you know, it's been pretty impressive. Sorry, I think someone else was. Oh, Councillor, I don't know.
I'd just like to add to the earlier comments. Huge congratulations to the team and to our pupils and carers that have got us to this place. I think the key thing that strikes me is the huge resilience this shows within our teaching force and with our pupils, given the years of the pandemic, which we do know had impacted their education, and that they're coming out of this stronger and better than before. So that is excellent. It's a brilliant place to build on even further. So that was really pleasing. Very pleased to hear Janice refer to boys' performance. Very interested to see how that we see the more detail on that and what's going on, and obviously the other attainment gap issues, which we will look at in detail in due course. But I'm glad you flagged that, and that there was an improved performance in that, and keen to see how more detail around that. So that was good. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. No other comments or questions? Excellent. Thank you, Janice. And we'll move now on to the next item after the verbal update, item 4. It's the report on the East Renfrewshire Children's Rights Report, and I believe that's Siobhan. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to examine how children's rights are currently respected and upheld within East Renfrewshire Council and its partners. It highlights key actions taking place to further embed children's rights across the Council and identifies the next steps which should be taken in light of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and Corporation Scotland Bill. The UNCRC is a legally binding international agreement setting out the civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights of every child, regardless of their race, religion or abilities. The Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014 places a duty on local authorities to report on the steps taken to further the effect of the UNCRC. Part 3, Section 15 of the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Bill sets out revised reporting duties for public authorities and once commenced, these duties will replace the reporting duties of the 2014 Children and Young People Scotland Act. In East Renfrewshire, our Improving Outcomes for Children and Young People partnership is committed to the promotion and protection of rights, and our Children's Services Plan places children's rights at the heart of its visions and actions, and you'll see that in the next paper. The East Renfrewshire Children's Rights Report outlines the steps taken through partnership working to support and uphold children's rights. The different articles of the UNCRC have been grouped into clusters, and that's because it's the structure that's recommended by the Scottish Government and by UNICEF when reporting on children's rights. And these clusters can be found from page 11 of the report onward and include key achievements such as the excellent outcome of our joint inspection for children at risk of harm, the establishment of our first youth assembly, our commitment to advancing equalities, our violence against women approaches, including mentors and violence and equally safe at school, our work around the Promise and the Promise Planning Pathway Project, supporting mental health and wellbeing for healthier minds in our newly established Learn Well service, our active enrichment and food dignity experiences through summer activities, and our work to support unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Children and young people have been involved in co-creating this report and developing a child-friendly version. So in conclusion, the wide range of activities shown demonstrate a clear awareness of the need to embed children's rights in all of our work. Appendix 1 of the report highlights a number of case studies which further highlight our commitment and success in advancing rights in the work that we do. And Appendix 2 highlights the next steps we will undertake in order to continue to advance children's rights within East Renfrewshire. So Education Committee is asked to note current practice within East Renfrewshire underpinning and ensuring children's rights, comment and approve the East Renfrewshire Children's Rights Report, and note the authority's key actions going forward to respect and to uphold children's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. And well, as Siobhan said, you know, at the end you can see what we're asked to do here about noting the current practice, comment and approve, and also note the authority's key actions. Any questions or comments in relation to the report? Councillor O'Donnell?
Really welcome this comprehensive report. There must have been a huge amount of work that's gone into preparing this. Just so I don't really have any problems with the report at all. It's just an observation on the case studies. Nothing there for our special needs, you know, Isabel Mayer or Carly Bart. I wonder, Communication Centre, I wonder if that's possible, possibly too late, I guess, but perhaps when it's next being reviewed that we consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've also created an interactive online tool this year that contains some of them, all of the information that's in this report, but also some additional case studies and further information. And we intend that to be a live document that, as and when good practice is shared, we can add to it. So we'll certainly look at that and we can add it to that, and also share the link of as a thing link as the tool we've used, so we can also share that with elected members.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Buchanan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, thanks, Siobhan, for this report. It's an absolutely outstanding report in terms of what we are doing and indeed what our children are doing and experiencing across the authority. And I think for all of us, we want to ensure that, that our authority and indeed the country, that we are a country that respects, that protects and fulfills children's rights. And I think that is key going forward, and that's clearly demonstrated in this report and the work that's been done alongside our partners and alongside in particular our children and young people who are responding to this report and have been active in ensuring that the information in it is not only correct, but they are participating to ensure that there is that continuous improvement and ensuring that we keep that moving forward. I think it's vital, and as we know, across Scotland, the UNCRC has been adopted by Scottish Parliament. We are clearly well ahead in terms of producing the information that shows that we are a rights respecting authority and taking that forward. And we look forward to the UNCRC being implemented fully, hopefully, across the UK. But we know that the work is ongoing here, and that stands us in very good stead. Certainly for the future, it creates great opportunity for our children and ensures that they have everything that we would want them to have under the guise of the UNCRC. So that's vital going forward, and vital that we have that continuous improvement and are always being challenged by our children and young people to ensure that we deliver. So thanks again for the report.
Thank you, Councillor McCann. Councillor Merrick.
It's a terrific report. So I've been doing this from home quite a bit, and there's been nobody to film. So for me, the vision is what encompasses the whole thing, and that's just more or less perfect. But being safe, children feel safe, equal, healthy, someone to trust that they're friends, but the catch point word is hope. Hope isn't some bland optimism kind of thing, things will be okay. It's that there is something continually worth working for, and bringing that up, and that kind of sums up, and we're seeing that coming through in the report. This is a great place to be at this point, and we know that the population of our children, when these ones will grow older, there's a lot more arriving, so things look good for the future if this keeps on, we hope. Thank you.
I haven't put mine on. Thank you. Any other comments or Dorothy?
Yeah, just very briefly, it's a tremendous read. You know, my heart sank when I looked at the number of pages I had to prepare for today, 169 or something. However, when I sat down the other day to read it, I couldn't stop. It's absolutely outstanding. And I learned things like we have the largest proportion of children and young people in any local authority in Scotland. I wasn't aware of that, you know. What a responsibility. But it's a tremendous report. It's got lots of wonderful pieces of information, very encouraging. Tremendous amount of work has gone into this, no doubt about it. So congratulations to you, Siobhan. I just thought it was great, and it just kept more and more information coming. It's really a great report. And also just from perhaps not the context of this, but from a personal point of view, I think it's right to say that every child has the right to, if they wish, a spiritual development, if that's appropriate for them. And I think it's something that we do exceptionally well in East Renfrewshire. So well done.
Thank you, Dorothy. I actually should acknowledge as well, and I'm sure Siobhan played a significant part of it, but it's also the partnership as well within it. And I'd like to acknowledge Arlene's with us today from HSCP, who they also, really there's so many services and to support the children, and it's that partnership that's key thing, isn't it? Bringing it all together. Any other comments then? We're happy to obviously commented and approve. We're happy to approve the children's rights report. Okay, thank you. Okay, and as you touched on there, the next item on the agenda is looking forward. So I'll ask her to now talk to it's the Children and Young People's Services Plan for 23 to 26. Thank you, Siobhan.
Thank you, Convener. Part 3 of the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014 places children's services planning duties on local authorities and health boards. Section 8(1) of the Act requires every local authority and its relevant health board to jointly prepare a children's services plan for the area of the local authority in respect of each 3-year period. The plan must be accompanied by a joint strategic needs assessment of our children and young people in East Renfrewshire, and that can be seen in Appendix 2. The purpose of this paper is to present our Children's Services Plan for 2023 to 2026, at our heart the next steps. It builds on the success of our 2020 to 2023 plan and sets out our vision for children, young people and their families over the next 3 years. As mentioned, our vision for children and young people in East Renfrewshire is that we want them to grow up loved, respected and given every opportunity to fulfil their potential. We want them to be safe, equal and healthy, have someone to trust, have friends, but most of all, have hope. And it is this vision that will drive the delivery of our new plan over the next 3 years. Pages 16 to 19 of the plan highlight 7 key priorities that we will focus on, including helping families and carers to give their children the best start in life in a nurturing, safe and stable home environment, protecting our most vulnerable children, young people and families, ensuring children and young people with complex additional needs are supported to overcome barriers to inclusion at home, at school and in the community, deliver on our corporate parenting responsibilities to our looked after and care experienced children and young people by fully implementing the promise, responding to the mental and emotional well-being and physical health needs of children and young people, upskilling our children's workforce and reducing the impact of poverty on children and families. And whilst key priority 4 directly relates to the promise, all of our priorities are in line with the principles of the promise and also seek to further implement the Getting It Right for Every Child framework. Our new plan also has been developed using a rights-based approach and directly links with our commitment to protecting and advancing children's rights in line with the UNCRC. The plan's been written in partnership with children, young people, families, carers and wider partners. Education Committee are asked to acknowledge the duties of the Children and Young People Act as they relate to Part 3 Children's Services Planning and note the content of the Children and Young People Services Plan 2023 to 2026 prior to submission to full council for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. I'll ask now for any questions or comments with regards to the services plan for 23-26. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, like the previous talk, another excellent paper. But what it highlights, and although it's for moving forward, it's very much a live document as we go through, as we move towards what comes next. Keeping alive the promise, ensuring that we meet those standards that we want for our children and young people is key. But one of the other key aspects is it recognises that breaking down of silos, which for too long probably existed in most aspects. Working with our partners to ensure the right outcomes and delivery is key because it's the only way we'll be able to achieve it. So it's right that it's here at Education Committee, but also recognises the part that our health and wellbeing services, that our health, that our IJB, that our environment department, that all services across the authority that we deliver for people are key in delivering on the outcomes for our children and young people. This paper highlights that. It stands us in the right way moving forward. And as I say, I think very much a live document, which we will continually to update on as we move through the years. So again, thanks very much for all the work on it, Siobhan. It's another excellent way, another document that I think needs great publicity to ensure that everyone across the authority understands the work that is going on to deliver for our young people.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Please, yeah, thank you. Actually, that's so it is for the future for the next 3 years. When is our next update going to? Will you come back like annually on this? I don't know if you mentioned that, Siobhan. To it gives an idea of progress.
So I don't think previously we've come back annually, but what we have in the past is aspects of it we would update on. So we have brought papers around GIRFIC refresh, healthier minds, mental health. So there will be aspects of it we would be reporting on, but we could bring it annually for an update.
Convener, some elements will also go through the likes of IJB, but elements like the promise and so on, there'll be updates on that. So it'll probably be, in that totality, we'll look at making sure that the progress is regularly updated to the different committees, given that it's a council-wide, and I think Councillor Buchanan was making that point that ultimately in order to deliver on this, we need to make sure that there's that joined-up approach across the whole council in order to support our children and young people to really thrive.
Okay, excellent. That's fine. Councillor O'Donnell.
I'm really glad Arlene's here because she'd be a bit bored hearing the same points that I mentioned yesterday. Obviously, this was discussed, and I'm only saying this for completeness, so that we've got it recorded in both areas. It's a really comprehensive but complex report. You know, it's very difficult to get your mind around some of the joined up working that's going on there. But thanks for everyone in preparing that. As I mentioned yesterday, I think having the plan on a page, very, very helpful because that digests it all. There was a couple of aspects of that I've raised with Arlene and Raymond yesterday that I said we'd go back to, so you don't need to respond to this now. First on outcomes, no specific reference to child poverty rates within that, and it's more of a general point. I didn't think the child poverty action plan that we had discussed before recess is that as integrated as it could be. Linked with that child poverty stuff, I think the ratios need to be checked. Arlene said they were checked. I still don't sort of recognise them. And I think it might be to do with the definitions, because I think there was about 4 different definitions of child poverty rates. So I think if we're clarifying what year it refers to and also what definition, because there are numerous definitions. So that's more of a tidy up. Also on that plan for the page in terms of measuring success, now this is an element of recency in terms of what's been happening on placement requests, but I think we do need to perhaps consider tracking in absolute terms the number of siblings that are split across primary schools and secondary schools as a result of placement requests, because obviously that's quite a burden on our young people and families. Something to consider. Don't need to respond now on that. 2 other more substantial points, and I think it links to the reporting, the annual sort of reporting. What is different in this report to the previous reports and why? Why is there a change of emphasis? And actually we didn't see the results. Well, I haven't seen them, maybe they're somewhere else, in terms of what we said we were going to do and what we actually did. So I think it'd be helpful to share that. And also in terms of how we measure a success, we don't have any baselines there yet. So I think that would be helpful for us to consider where we, again, as ultimately we review this, where we come from and where we're going to. Now, this was all discussed at the IJB yesterday. I'm very happy to take those points offline rather than having a huge discussion here at Education Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Donnan. Do you want to make any particular response now, or acknowledge what Councillor Donnan was saying about taking it offline?
Sorry. Thank you for your comments. And there are several comments that we've already had discussions around. So certainly in terms of those measurable outcomes, we do have the 21, how we'll measure our success, and we have been in discussions around we need to have a baseline with that and set ourselves some smart targets so that we're able to report on the success of it. So that work is in progress, and we'll be able to share that with you once that's complete. In terms of and I'm aware that this was maybe discussed yesterday at the IGB, but the targets linked to child poverty, obviously on page 19 at priority 7, it is around contributing to the implementation and delivery of fairer East Wrenn child poverty report. And we do work very closely with partners around all of the different services, and child poverty is very much a priority that we are working on within that.
Maybe if I could just pick up the siblings one, just if I may. I mean, I think that's a key part of priority 4 in terms of the corporate parenting. But I think what you're referring to, I would say, was slightly different, because we can make sure that all siblings are together in their catchment school. I don't think there's ever been a case where we've not been able to do that. What we're getting is families choosing to make placing requests out with And that's very different to what I think is captured in the responsibilities of local authorities around corporate parenting, where I think for those families that we have that corporate parenting responsibility, we need to make sure we're doing really well with them. And that's that close working with HSCP and education together. But I think that's a different question in terms of the sort of legal position. So happy to take that sort of offline and explore some of that and maybe involve Jerry Mann and his team around that one.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Do we have any? Sorry, I think actually that's it touches on, you mentioned as well about the annual reporting, or Chris has been able to quantify and see exactly the outcomes. That it's excellent, and it's we were happy with it, and there's lots of very good things in it. But then it's getting the further down the line, 6 months, a year, is to know then that it's achieving what we had hoped it would. I think that's possibly right. Any other questions or comments at all? Okay. So I think, yes, we were asked to acknowledge the duties of the Children and Young People Act and to note the content. I believe we've done so. Everyone else is happy. We can, sorry, move on to the next item on the agenda. Press the button there, sorry, on the microphone. And we're moving on now to its report on the review of the sustainable rate for early learning and childcare funded provision. And I believe this is Graham. Thank you, Graham.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. The purpose of this report is to update the Education Committee on the recent review undertaken on the sustainable rate that's paid to funded providers for the provision of the statutory entitlement, and subsequently to seek approval for payment of the proposed new rate for the 23-24 session. I'm sure members of the committee will be familiar with the work undertaken in recent years to bring about the expansion of early learning and childcare to meet the Scottish Government's commitment to deliver 1,140 hours to all eligible children, with a number of regular reports having been considered by this committee over the last few years. In line with the funding follows the child's approach, delivery of the 1140 entitlement is based on a partnership between the council and a number of independent providers and childminders. These are collectively known as funded providers. All funded providers are paid an hourly rate for the provision of these hours, and this is known as a sustainable rate. Elected members may recall that in October last year, the committee approved an increase in the rates following the review of the costs of delivery. At that stage, it was agreed that we would undertake a further review for the 23-24 session, recognising the continuing financial uncertainty facing both the council and providers themselves. Turning to the report itself, members will note the results of the review undertaken on both the staff and non-staff cost elements of delivery, with a rate of £5.87 being proposed to be paid for the 23-24 session. This represents an increase of slightly more than 3% on last year's figure, and this is in line with what's been proposed across other sort of neighbouring authorities, and it's an increase of more than 10% on the rate that was in place prior to the 23-23 session. In addition to the proposed increase in the hourly rate, for the statutory entitlement, it's also proposed that the food rate also be increased from 50p to 57p per hour. This brings the amount paid for food in line to that in our own establishments, again part of that provider neutral approach that we have in place. I would stress the council has a very good working relationship with our providers, and we've been engaging with them over recent months as part of this process. In addition to the regular early years forums that we have in place, which funded providers are part of, 2 specific sessions have been held with providers as part of this review. We've engaged with them further. I just want to highlight a couple of additional key points to elected members. In addition to the payments noted, paragraph 14 highlights the wide range of additional supports that are also in place for funded providers from the department. And these have specifically been highlighted as a real benefit for providers in supporting that quality improvement and staff development, and to make sure that all children can benefit regardless of the provider they attend. Finally, members will recognise that, of course, there does remain a degree of uncertainty about the wider financial landscape, but also some of the potential future costs that are facing providers. Importantly, I would note that the national guidance around the review of rates makes clear that authorities should remain mindful of their own sustainability, in addition to supporting providers with their financial sustainability. So it's looking at those 2 aspects. And on that basis, it's been important to strike a good balance here, ensuring we can provide a new rate as close to the beginning of the session as possible, And so we took this decision to proceed early based on the review on the evidence available to us at this time. Subject to approval today, the new rate will apply for all funded hours from the beginning of the 23-24 session, effectively being backdated to Monday the 14th of August. However, this will be included in the first payments, so it again minimises the disruption facing providers. There will of course be additional costs associated with this increase, and this will be reflected in future budget spending pressures, and the department will need to consider this going forwards in terms of what we can potentially do in future. And so in conclusion, convener, in line with the Council's commitment to review the rate being paid to funded providers, this report outlines the work, and the proposal for the new rates to be paid for provision for funded hours in the new session. Education Committee therefore is asked to note the review undertaken, approve the increase in the sustainable hourly rate and associated food rate, and finally request that these new rates be backdated to be paid for all of session 23-24. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have any questions or comments on the sustainable rate? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Graham. I just really welcome the consultation you had with the funded providers. Very helpful to see that in advance of this, so that we're not just imposing something and we actually talk to them in advance. So really welcome that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose coming in, I think, part of it obviously was around the discussion of the rate itself, but equally there was discussions around sort of level of support, for example, looking at how we can be flexible in how that support's delivered, looking at twilight sessions, various different aspects of how we can provide that support to really make sure they can access it, because there's no point, in having that support available if it's not able to be accessed. So we look at all of these and, continue to work very closely with them, take any feedback on board.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to echo some of the comments, and thanks, Graham, for all of the work that goes in. I know some of the discussions can be quite stressful, and it was good to note that we had started those discussions early and in a very constructive way with our funded providers to get to this outcome. So I think that it's a testament to the work that's going on behind the scenes to ensure that we are in this position. I think that's positive going forward. Again, I know that across the country these discussions are taking place. It's good to see that we're also working with our neighbouring authorities to ensure that there is an element there whereby there might be some crossover in terms of the provision, but it's great to see that that work has been done, and happy to approve the paper and the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Merrick.
Just to thank Graham for the comprehensive report. It's great to have something, not just a bald number, but set in context and obviously recognising all the work that's going on behind that. And we are at the very start of the school year, which is even better. Thank you very much. Happy to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Any other questions or comments? The only final thing maybe that I think we discussed this in particular, the hourly meal rate increase is good to see, because I think particularly food inflation is significant, and it acknowledges that. So I think that's beneficial as well for the provision and, well, the parents, I think, to know that that's been taken care of. Unless there's any other questions or comments, we're asked to note the review and to approve the increase in the sustainable hourly rate to 587, approve the increase in the meal provision hourly rate to 57p, and also then request the Director to arrange for the backdating of the new rates. Committee's happy to. Okay, lovely, thank you. And okay, with that, we can move on to the last item on the agenda, number 7, the Director of Education's report on the Education Department's end-year report from 22 to 23. Okay, sorry, not Mark, it's Graham. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. So the purpose of this report is to update and advise Committee of the end-year report on the performance of the Education Department for 22 to 23. And by way of background, elected members will know that the Education Department has a well-embedded approach to continuous improvement and regularly brings reports to committee on various aspects of performance at both the department and individual establishment level, which obviously was seen even through this morning. Over the last year, for example, Education Committee has considered reports including Standards and Quality Report, providing an overview of departmental performance, reports on progress towards achieving the priorities set out in the National Improvement Framework, Scottish Attainment Challenge, as well as regular updates on the impact of pupil equity funding and progress in the early learning and childcare expansion. So it's just to name a few of the various reports that have been considered. This year, in addition, following the disruption from the pandemic, members will also recall that several reports considered under Education Scotland inspections, with head teachers having had the opportunity to come along and present to members directly. This end-of-year report provides an overview, therefore, of the activities and performance of the department in contributing towards the Council's overall outcome delivery plan. If I can firstly just highlight a couple of key points. And this report relates to the 22-23 financial year running from April 22 to March 23, and as such can often be out of sync with the academic year and the department's ordinary reporting cycles. So I do always think it's sometimes just careful to be careful of that when we're making any direct comparisons. And therefore the majority of the performance data actually relates to the previous session, 21-22, and isn't linked, for example, to the data that Janice shared earlier on. So it can just be slightly out of sync. So I would just ask members to note that when considering any of this. Secondly, given the disruption over recent years, members will note that targets haven't been set consistently for all indicators within this report, and many of them are recorded for information only at this stage. That said, members will be aware that there are a range of ambitious targets in place across the department relating to various aspects of performance, and these have been considered by committee previously through different strategies and plans that we have in place. Moving forward, I can assure members that targets have now been set for the ODP, reflecting those in place across previously considered reports and plans, and I understand these are going to be reported to Council in the coming weeks as part of the overall refresh of the ODP. So that will provide members the opportunity to consider those at that stage. If I can just turn to the report itself, members will note that the department has continued to make very good progress in our work towards achieving the vision of everyone attaining, everyone achieving through excellent experiences. With clear plans in place, driven through the department's local improvement plan, priority continues to be on closing the attainment gap, with a focus on addressing some of those legacy impacts that we continue to see from the pandemic. Paragraph 11 in the report provides a strong list of highlights, many of which will be familiar to members from the different reports that have previously been considered, showing the department's strong performance, for example, in attainment, continued focus on improving services for customers, and an emphasis on support for staff, pupils and families, for example, through the Healthier Mind service and the Learn Well service that we have in place. And building on the successes of the last year and our robust approach to self-evaluation, paragraph 12 sets out some of the key priorities for the year ahead, again demonstrating our ambition to continue to deliver the best for our young learners across East Renfrewshire. So in conclusion, Convener, the report summarises the performance of the department over the last year in terms of our contribution towards the Council's wider outcome delivery plan. It outlines the strong performance and the breadth of work being undertaken as we continue to prioritise efforts to close the attainment gap and also the ambitious plans for the year ahead. Education Committee is therefore asked to note and comment on the report as a summary of our performance for 22-23. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. As Graham said, we've been asked to note and comment, and do we have any specific comments? Councillor Prangdon.
Page, I think it's on page 164 of the papers today. It mentions exclusion rates. If I'm correct, sorry, I've lost my page. I'm slightly concerned about how, I know we haven't got the data for 2022-23 yet, but I'm hearing anecdotally from councils across Scotland that they believe levels are actually higher than reported, due to the fact that we know it's been in the media, there has been more incidents of violence in schools, and particularly high schools, and that teachers are sometimes, when they report this to their superiors, that it's kind of covered up. And I'm not saying this has happened in East Renfrewshire, but I know it has been in the press quite recently, and I know colleagues in Dumfries and Galloway are facing this issue. So how accurate are we? And is there, I know we want to keep exclusions low, but sometimes we do need to exclude pupils if it is a case of bad behaviour and violence towards teachers. And how do we ensure that teachers feel heard and listened to when they report it to their principal teachers, their head teachers? Because I know, speaking to a councillor in Glasgow City who is a former teacher, that she said certainly in her career as a teacher she faced this issue where she went to the head teacher of a certain school and it was covered up. because they're afraid it would affect their performance to the education department. So how are we addressing that? And I know it's something the trade unions have been taking up as well. I just want to make sure that teachers are supported to report things, and it doesn't reflect badly on their teaching style. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pagnell. Sean?
Thank you. I'll come in here. In terms of the support we offer, promoting positive behaviour was a key aspect of the ASN review, and there is a work stream currently made up of a range of staff, including teacher representatives, who are working on a range of supports, including professional learning, updating the policy to make sure that it does take in current guidance, and it is very much linked to included, engaged and involved. We do, I mean, obviously there's a range of supports that we can offer to children and young people, but we do understand that sometimes within that range of tools that we have, exclusions are part of that. Teachers are empowered to make that decision, head teachers, and they would be supported. I suppose the challenge that we would offer is what's happening to support those young people or children whilst they're not in school. So looking to see, are they still having the opportunity to access their learning within another way? But there certainly wouldn't be anything in terms of being told they weren't allowed to exclude or covering anything up. There are really clear guidelines around the sort of processes that you would follow in terms of that. In terms of the exclusion rates, and obviously you've mentioned there around all of the publicity there is just now around violence in schools, we did a bit of an analysis of last session, and when you break down the figures, for example, in our secondary schools, there were 0.18% of children across our secondary estate were involved in a violent incident. When you take that down to the number of incidents, that was 24 incidents across all secondary pupils in East Renfrewshire. Interestingly, there was a higher number in early learning and childcare and in primary. So we continue to support children through resources such as Healthier Minds, Learn Well. Our educational psychologists play a really crucial role in supporting children and young people, but also staff around those sort of de-escalation and positive strategies. So we continue to support children and try to use preventative measures, but it certainly is a tool that schools are aware that, if appropriate, they can use.
Maybe just to add to Ms McColgan's comments, I think there's been nationally, Councillor Pragnell, there's been a conflation of the sort of exclusions part along with the sort of violent incidents. And I guess when you think of violent incidents, you think of the situation of somebody coming in with a knife or being attacked. And I think what figures that Ms McColgan was talking about actually will be helpful to unpack that in a bit more detail. That will be going to the JCC. We have regular meetings with our colleagues at the Health and Safety Committee. So actually that sort of scrutiny, that looking at that is there, but also then that support and those mechanisms that we need to put into place. Because actually, as Siobhan was saying, there's far more incidents being recorded as a violent incident to staff in our nurseries than in our secondaries. And I think that in people's minds is not really what they're thinking of when they're thinking about violent incidents, and the exclusions play that out. Now that doesn't minimise in any way the impact on those members of staff. We need to support them in our nurseries and our primaries, and we need to make the resources there. But I do think there's been a conflation in the media, and in some of those cases we just need to be careful, because the potential there is there could be a vilifying of children and sort of marking them out in that way, which probably wouldn't be helpful. So I do think it comes back to that kind of nurture and those children's rights. We need to hold the tensions of those different things.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Pragnell, you anything further?
Yeah, I would like to add, I think it's very important that teachers feel that they can go to their trade unions as well, because I know that is something that friends of mine who are teachers, sometimes there's a bit of a hostile environment to unions, and they're told, one instance I was told about was, it's a bit early in your career to be involved in your union. So, it's it didn't happen in East Renfrewshire, I have to say, but I think we always have to be aware that that trade unions are important amongst the teaching staff.
Thank you, Councillor Pye. No, I believe Des has now got a comment to on it.
I can't resist. Yeah, I mean, I saw that part of the report as well, Councillor. You know, so I'm always kind of interested in the information. I mean, since the unions have been brought up, I think it's probably appropriate for me just to kind of set out, I think, where the EIS local association sees things. I mean, our advice is clear that it's the prerogative of any of our members to report any incident of violence, whether it be verbal or physical, or on the online ear system. And I have to say that's a position in our discussions through LNCT that isn't completely supported by the council. I haven't encountered any situation where there has been a discouraging of reporting. In fact, I think it's the opposite. Actually, I think that my experience is that the council under-reporting is the last thing it wants, because actually you can't actually solve the problems unless you know that they're happening. So our advice is clear, and insofar as I'm aware, it is a position that's completely supported by the Education Department. As the Director has pointed out, we do have twice a year meetings to review the figures in some detail. We get a breakdown, and I have to say it's not just teachers that are subject to violent incidents, it's local government staff as well. In fact, the split can be roughly about 50-50. I think that obviously that the figures will come out in the Education, Health and Safety Committee, health report that will go to JICC next month. And as the Director has pointed out, having sight of the figures on a quarterly basis, as the unions do get, it is actually predominantly in early years that the bulk of the incidents are happening. So I think that does mean that questions have to be asked as to why that is the case. I think there is absolutely no doubt, anecdotally from our members, that the impact of lockdown has had a significant effect. And I've heard that not just from members in East Renfrewshire, but also from colleagues in other local associations across the country. So I think what is needed is a joint effort to address this, but also ensuring that adequate support is given to any teacher or local government staff member who is subject, unfortunately, to an incident of violence.
Thank you, Des. Very helpful. Do you want to come in first, Janice? Or Councillor Buchanan?
Yeah, just to touch on some of the comments there that Des made. I know that we've not experienced issues in terms of the fear of reporting, if you like, across our authority, or certainly none that I'm aware of, and I know that we've been very good in ensuring that that happens. And I think, as the Director touched on, there has been a conflation of figures in the press, and nationally work is ongoing to look at those aspects of the figures, to look at the recording measures that are in place, because not everyone necessarily records in the same manner. So there is ongoing work nationally between COSLA and Scottish Government to look at those aspects of it, to ensure that we get proper detail and what lies behind it. And of course, the key aspect in all of this is to ensure that our teachers, that any member of staff who faces any violent incident is supported, but equally that we look at the child that may be involved in that, and the work that's required to ensure that they are supported given the circumstances. And as has been touched on, anecdotally, there may be issues arising post-lockdown, if you like, that will be looked at. But we need to ensure that those services are available to everyone involved in those incidents. And that's going to be key going forward. And I don't doubt that information will start to come forward as we start to gather information from around the country, looking at what's happening in terms of these incidents and looking at the appropriate recording measures that are required.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Janice?
Very much to echo what you're saying, Councillor Buchanan. I think it's very important that we look at the data, but it's really important we know the story behind it. And we have noticed an increase in early years and additional support needs, and there is sometimes a close alignment with that. But it's understanding the story behind it, and yeah, there is a lot of it that can be linked to COVID and lockdown, but it's also about maybe building the capacity and of the staff, because we've got a relatively new workforce in early years as well as part of the expansion. So it's about trying to get that balance of making sure that we are supporting their well-being, because nobody should come into their work and be a victim of violence, but also building their capacity in some of these de-escalation things and really seeing the benefits of the implementation of our promoting positive behaviour policy, but also working with that child and understanding their point of view. And all behaviour is a form of communication. So when children are behaving in this way, they are obviously communicating, and we are not very good at listening to them at the moment. From that, if they're only way that they can communicate with us is that violence. So we need to work with the children, understand it, early intervention and support, so that we can give them different strategies, different opportunities to communicate their thoughts and feelings, but also work with the family and our colleagues in HSCP. And I think there's a real thread throughout that today, that some of our young children have suffered trauma, and it's really close partnership working that will support us to come out that other end. So there's lots of the data, and at times it does go up. I've sat in this committee and been asked about why it's so high, and I think it's so high at times because it is a tool that people are allowed to use judiciously. I can't get my teeth in today, but I think it's more important, and that's where we work across the department and other departments to make sure we understand the story behind. And I think it's really heartening to know that certainly that you're feeling that the department is giving the same message as the trade unions, because I would certainly say that's the message we get from head teachers as well, that they're supporting their staff.
Thank you, Janice. Actually, in relation to just what everyone's been talking about, and you specifically there, when we look back at the previous and the sustainable rate and the additional services we provide to early learning and as educational psychologists, you're talking about the intervention. And I think that's something that we additionally do that, well, hopefully will, that early intervention is a key part of it, I think. Just to mention that, do we have any other questions or comments or notes? No? Oh, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Just going back to the report in the broad sense. Feeling a bit in a time warp here, because after we've had Janice's references to the 23 results, now back to 22 results. So clearly an excellent report. So very, very well done. So my comments are more clarifications than criticisms or as such. So I think page 157, and it's about the positive outcomes, and there was an adjustment of the 98.5 to 97.5 or something. What's going on there in terms of the final numbers? The general comment on the impact of LASER and COVID. Good to see that those are having impacts in terms of our annual reports. Interested to see page 162, the delays on early learning. I think it'd be very interesting to see what the split of that is across the authority, Leven Valley versus Eastwood, and also boys and girls. Again, on this point about boys attainment, we would hope it's probably more boys than girls, but we don't know. I don't know. So that might be something again to take off the line. And again, this is a clarification point, and it's to do with the absence rates. And I think it's less to do with the teachers' numbers and more to do with the local government employees. Because when we last looked at this at June Cabinet, I think Louise said, don't look at the numbers. So I'm just wondering, has that issue been resolved and these are the right numbers that we should be looking at? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell.
If I pick up the absence one and then maybe hand over to Janice around the leaver destinations and some of the early years ones. So the sickness absence, as was reported to council, there was a concern around the figures and the accuracy of it, and Louise's department said they would go away and look at those. They've done that, and just in time for the papers coming out last Friday, they were updated. So there was actually, when they reviewed it, initially the thought was that it only affected local government, actually, when they've looked at the iTrent system, it seems to have affected both the local government and the teaching number. So if you were to do a very detailed, if you had too much time on your hands and you went back to last year's report, the numbers have been adjusted, and they are now the accurate numbers that are in the papers that you have in front of you today. So the actual numbers there for teachers have gone up slightly. For local government, it has done the reverse. Local government, from what we thought it was for local government education staff, now sitting at 10.0 if you were to round that. Initially, that was up at 14 point something. So it's come down dramatically. The teachers one has gone up slightly. So my understanding is Sharon is going to update CMT on all the sort of underlying details around that, but they are now accurate figures.
Thanks for that clarification. That's great.
So the school leaver destination, they're both snapshots at different times in the year. So the first figure, it was accurate at that point. The second figure is the follow-up. It's to see who's still in that destination. So looking at the follow-up, and that's the highest follow-up that we've ever had at 97.5. It wasn't necessarily the same children. Some people have decided to, that's not the course for them, and take a gap year. And we're lucky that the numbers that we're talking about, we can actually have that individual conversation. And I think that's one of the advantages of East End. But some of them have decided to change course. Some decided for employment, and employment's not for them yet. So there can be various individual reasons. I think for us, those that are unemployed, not seeking, are the ones that we really want to find out. And there's been a few children where their mental health and wellbeing is at the point where they are not in a position to seek further education or employment. But that's not to say the education department and the schools don't still have some sort of communication. And we're really lucky that we work very closely. We've got an excellent partnership with Skills Development Scotland and their staff. And it really is a team approach to make sure those young, that 2.5%, we know where they are, we know what's on offer. And then that feeds into our partnership with Work East End, because it might be, for example, I know that we're in conversation just now about some modern apprenticeship vacancies, and can we target some of those young people who have changed that destination from those initial figures, and that's that close scrutiny. But that I call it interference, because they think they've left school, but we're still interfering or supporting, depending on what day you speak to young people. But that's why there's that slight variation. And the early years one, if I can just quickly say, so that information, we're about to do the similar assessment now. So that was last year's. And there is no real difference between both sides of the authority at any one point. It varies, but there is no significant difference. And with literacy, boys and girls tend to perform at a similar rate. And in numeracy, boys tend to be a wee bit stronger. And that leads to that whole conversation. Again, it's back to that looking at the stories behind. So if boys are a wee bit stronger, how come they maybe dip at certain stages throughout their primary, and then they maybe get stronger again at secondary? So, but there is real signs last year of recovery, which has given us some optimism that maybe some of the sort of, let's say, the rate of progress in primary and secondary is not as strong as what we saw in early years, and whether that's down to 1140, whether that's down to children being injured, and we really targeted some kids during the hub who we felt were at risk of not achieving their developmental milestones, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Janice. Councillor
Very helpful, Janice. That's great. And it's actually very encouraging that there is that follow-up and trying to find destinations as and when people change their minds, which they're completely entitled to do, and actually probably encourage, because sometimes it's not the right thing for them. And that, so that's good. What, just to clarify, what's that time frame then? Is that 6 months, 3 months, or?
It's basically September, March, where they get it. So it's usually towards the end of September, beginning of October. They'll take they'll take a snapshot of what children are in what destination, and then they'll do it again in March. And we get, again, the figures are a wee bit delayed for us, but that we don't wait for those figures. We have got tracking systems in place where SDS and the schools, and we also, and Mark works very closely with the college principals and analyse that at a regional level as well.
Maybe just to add to that, because committee will have seen the other measure that sometimes becomes a bit confusing, the annual participation measure, which I suppose is probably getting closer to that idea that you were asking about, Councillor O'Donnell, in terms of that, almost that, looking at that on almost a daily basis. That's what that captures. What are those young people in between the ages of 16 and 19? What are they doing at that point? So it captures whether they're in education, in work, gone on to higher, so it doesn't, it's able to distinguish between higher education, college, school, but equally those that are not in any sort of positive destination. And I think we're sitting at 97.1%. So that's all 16 to 19-year-olds. And obviously, the longer that you're away from school, the more difficult that becomes, the more robust those systems have to be. Longer term, obviously, we would like to be able to move nationally to a situation where you're able to track that through, along with the universities, with the colleges, perhaps through to sort of, early 20s. That would be the sort of long-term goal. At the moment, the systems beyond the sort of local authority level are not there, but we've got that good tracking in place for 16 to 19-year-olds. And as Janice was saying, I have kind of meetings 3 or 4 times a year with the college principals, where we're also then drilling down into that to say, well, if young people have left East Renfrewshire and gone to college, but then dropped out in March, what is the learning that we need to do about that? What is the kind of course provision that the colleges are providing? But equally, what is the preparation that we're doing in terms of secondary school? Have we got the right courses in place there to support them? So you're getting that ongoing learning. It's back to that where we started as a committee with reflecting on Dr. Angel about that lifelong learning and actually preparing our young people to be able to do that throughout, whatever destination they go on to.
I'm really encouraged to hear that that's going on. That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Yep, absolutely. Very encouraging. Just thinking about COSLA, children and young people, Councillor Buchanan, and obviously I know that you are in frequent conversations with the Cabinet Secretary for Education, and in terms of what we're discussing here, what are your thoughts on it? It sounds like getting, nationally taking it beyond, to the point where you're beyond university or whatever, so that it's a key thing to track, for our young people and how successful they're being or not.
Yeah, it is key, and sometimes the outcomes can be very difficult to measure in any short-term basis, because sometimes the outcomes can be significantly longer, can be going to 10, almost generational, if you like, in that sense of it. But one of the key things that is ongoing is, you'll know that there's a number of reviews ongoing at the moment in terms of education, its structure, whether that be through qualifications, etc. So there's a variety of different reports that all have brought together roughly at the same time with a lot of information, and that currently has been discussed, and as you'll be aware, we'll discuss that at the Children and Young People Board, but it's also ongoing with our government colleagues, and we'll look at how education looks in the future, and that's everything from not just the teaching and the practices that we know, but what the qualifications look like, how that gets moved forward, and how we then measure those outcomes in some form. So that's, as you know, an ongoing process, and hopefully we'll see some of the decisions start to come forward on that over the next couple of months.
Excellent, great, thank you. Do we have any other comments and questions with regards to this paper? And I think then we have quite thoroughly we've been asked to comment and note on the content of the report and the summary of the Education Department's performance, and so I believe we've done so. So thank you very much, everyone, and that's our last item on the agenda. So thank you all for attending, and lovely to see you, and look forward to seeing you in future. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.